Welcome back to the State of the Union Conference. We carry on with our program. We are focusing, as you know, on 8 main themes here. This is geopolitics, this is strategic autonomy, this is public health, and so much more here. And please participate, carry on sending those questions and your comments on social media, on the event platform, on Swapbox, and also on the official website. Go on the stream there and tell us what you think about that. We do have all your questions coming here. Keep them coming, because now on the agenda we have a conversation on strategic autonomy led by Sarah Nouwen, Chair and Professor of Public International Law at the European University Institute.
It is a great honor to introduce, welcome, and converse with Mr. Josep Borrell Fontelles, High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy and Vice President of the European Commission. Now, my internal memory disk is too limited to enumerate his extensive curriculum vitae. But one aspect of the CV is unforgettable to all of us here present at the EUI. He is, among many, many other things, a former president of this beloved institution. It is a great honor for us that even though he has to be at a very important meeting in Porto among European leaders, he's also willing to be with us and willing to discuss with us. Now, at a time that millions of people across the world are mourning people, loved ones lost to COVID, and in India alone, hundreds of thousands of people are infected still every day, it is inappropriate to speak of silver linings of the pandemic. But the pandemic has shown the importance of one ancient, and I have to add, non-European wisdom. Life is often not either or, but it is both and. So Mr. Borrell is both in Porto and in Florence. He's both with European leaders and he's with us, academics and policy makers. He is both physically absent, but very much present in the world of ideas. Mr. Borrell, thank you so much for being with us and your willingness to speak on the topic of Europe in a changing world.
Grazie, tantissime grazie. Voglio dire in italiano il mio sincero ringraziamento per il compromesso di tutti quelli che hanno contribuito durante questi 10 anni a fare l'estate dell'Union. E voglio ricordare a Marco Del Panta, il segretario generale che ha lanciato questa idea, e dopo Pasquale Ferrara che l'hanno continuato. È un grandissimo piacere essere qui 10 anni dopo per continuare a parlare dell'Europa a Firenze. And now I'm jumping to English because bad English has become the universal language of the Europeans. Well, dear colleagues, dear friends, I regret that we cannot be together personally, but nevertheless, we do it virtually again on this 10th anniversary of the conference that, as I remember it, was launched in 2011, and when I was serving as at the Institute president with the idea of Marco Del Panta and later Pasquale Ferrara. And now it is a key forum for debate on the future of Europe, the state and the future of Europe. So congratulations to Renaud, the current president, and to all of you for this achievement and for this 10th anniversary. Well, you asked me to speak about the Europe's role in the world and how do we see the challenges and our response to these challenges. It's a vast topic, so let me try to sketch some lines. Some lines about 3 points, 3 specific points. The first one is about methods, speed and methods. Because we Europeans, we need to realize the speed and the scale of the changes that are taking place around us. And I wonder if the European citizens are sufficiently aware of that. The important thing is the relative speed. Even if you continue running, if the others run quicker than you, in fact, you are going backwards. And the speed and the mass. The speed of China multiplied by the mass makes the world changing at a pace that I am certainly sure that we Europeans are not enough aware of that. In Europe, we tend to be busy with ourselves. We are still quite a lot of Eurocentric. And the pandemic has understandably strengthened this tendency of looking at ourselves. And everyone is focusing on vaccinations and the recovery. In both cases, the role of the European Union has been crucial. And I think that we don't get credit for it. We don't get enough credit for what the European Union has done. We got a lot of criticism, but maybe we don't get enough credit for what the European Union as an institution has done for ourselves and for the rest of the world. As I'm saying, the world is changing very fast. And yesterday I was in London sharing with the stage of the Indo-Pacific the pace of this change. And I was really aware that if we want to become a real global player, we have to do much more. And that's what our citizens ask for. Because if you look at the opinion polls, certainly citizens are ahead of the policymakers. The number of European citizens supporting, willing a stronger Europe in the world has always been high, but it has risen recently to more than 70%. Maybe ordinary citizens are more aware than the leaders about the world threats and power politics. Intuitively, they understand that Europe needs to stick together because no one of us will be able to influence the pace of the world alone. Not even the biggest member states has a weight in front of what's happening today with a race of countries of the size of a continent. So my first message is to underline a sense of urgency. In Brussels, there is not sense of urgency. And we need it. We need to think accordingly with the pace of the events. Take security and defense, for example. There is an enormous potential and a pressing need to develop the European Union into a security provider, a global security provider, a security actor. And in order to do that, we know what to do. Investing in technologies and capabilities together, identifying and facing new security threats on the cyberspace, being ready to deploy forces quickly to tackle security crisis, and all that based on a European way of doing security, which integrates together civil and military components, working with partners when possible, based on a clear reading of local dynamics. Strategic autonomy means the capacity of acting alone when needed and together with others when possible. And we do a lot of things, and it's not easy to understand all the many acronyms that we are using: PESCO, CAR, TDF, EPF, la super lettre, no? But what we need is to ensure that these instruments and initiatives deliver real outcome and do that quickly, because we cannot wait to see the results in 5 years' time. In 5 years' time, the game will be over. And that requires member states to take seriously what the treaty says about the willingness of building a common foreign and security policy. And this needed more than ever because our environment is becoming very dangerous. We live in a fast worsening security environment. And this sense of urgency has to be applied to a broader foreign policy. Although the truth, I have to confess, is that we are too often blocked by our divisions because we don't share a common understanding of the world. And if you don't share a common understanding of the world, it's quite difficult to pretend to have a common foreign policy. Our political structure, we are an association of member states with some supranational institution, but we are not a federation. We are not a centralized authoritarian country. Our response typically comes later than others. It's the way it is because our decision procedures are much cumbersome. President Biden is the president of a federation. Putin and Xi are the leaders of authoritarian countries. Here, we have to agree with 27 democratic states. And it takes too long. And too often, our answer consists of strong nouns but weak verbs. And at a conference like this, I think that we have to speak frankly and debate how we can do better. And the main question is, it is reasonable that we always have to wait for the last member state to join the consensus in order to be able to act? When and how could we move forward in the smaller groups, still being Europeans, and not a coalition of the will of some European member states, which is a different thing? And how can we turn our economic weight into political power? Because we have a lot of tools in order to participate in the competition in the world. But where the US does a grand strategy because they have an integrated power, and where China does, under the Belt and Road Initiative, a lot of networks, we are still the masters of silo thinking and disjointed efforts. In Brussels, each policy tends to develop according to its own logic and rhythm. There is the communitarian pillar, the intergovernmental pillar, and there are also problems of mentality. And by that, I mean reluctance to think in terms of power, priorities, trade-offs, linking goals and means. I know that none of these kinds of methods is new. It's always been like this, you can say, but the context is new, and it makes more urgent to find solutions. My second point is about neighborhood. The most striking aspects here is the degree to which our neighborhood has become in fire, has become crowded and competitive. There is a rise of what I say is empire mentality by some of our neighbors, Russia and Turkey. More and more actors think in terms of zones of influence. They recognize the sovereignty of the states, but not of the people. They are reluctant to talk about human rights. They consider that internal affairs. And they are not shy in playing power politics, something that we are not doing. At the same time, the demand from people in the neighborhood for more European Union engagement is stronger than ever. In our neighborhood, be it in Ukraine, in Belarus, in the north of Africa, in the Sahel, people look at us because they expect from us to be part of the solution. They want more Europe. They want more Europe, and they want us to deliver faster and better. Because at the end of the day, the European model of democracy, solidarity, freedoms, fundamental rights remains tremendously powerful and attractive. And what Biden is doing now, President Biden is doing now in the US, is a certain convergence to this socioeconomic model. And that's why I think we must continue to work with anyone that shares our vision and aspires to live according with our values. This means, in practical terms, to continue engagement with the Western Balkans and keeping the whole region on an European path, without doubt, overcoming the difficulties and the hesitancies. We have to continue offering the Western Balkans a European perspective, or we'll have a black hole at the core of Europe. These include reviving the Serbia-Kosovo dialogue, in which I am fully engaged. This means supporting Ukraine when it faces Russian aggression, and also to require that they implement the reform agenda if they want to become closer to the EU. This means to continue supporting the people in Belarus. This means supporting Libya and this new national unity government. This means to continue being in the Sahel on an integrated approach of human development and security. The list is long. And my second message is that as European Union, we need to step up in our neighborhood, demanding and offering more. And once again, I wonder if European citizens are aware of how much, depending on what's happening in our neighborhood, is our collective security. But security starts very far away from our borders. My third point is on the global level and relates to our strategic positioning and narrative. Because, it's clear for me that it's an increasing global struggle around a battle of narrative. The pandemic has created a battle of narrative, and Europe needs a narrative. We had one. Europe is peace. And this narrative has been pushing for the European integration for half a century. But now it's not enough. Because for the younger generation, for people who are studying here in Florence, peace is the natural situation of things. War? What do you mean, war? Well, war is not impossible. But peace has become so natural among the Europeans, and it's such an incredibly good news, that the narrative of Europe is peace is no longer creating enthusiasm, dynamics. It's not a driving force. We need another narrative. And this other narrative can only be which role the Europeans want to play in the world. And today we all are comparing vaccination rates and talk about vaccine diplomacy, and people in Africa, in Southeast Asia, in South America are asking themselves which system is better to deliver for their citizens. And there is a competition among systems. Systems that present themselves being, I am much more efficient than the European one. And we see fights over technology and trade and which standards to apply. You go to Russia, the European firms will tell you that the Chinese standards are more and more being implemented, being used on the technological market, and so we are losing ground. And the big question is who will master certain technologies and on which values their use will be based. Which societal model will Africa choose? When you see at the incredible demographic dynamics of Africa, it's so important to know which model of development this continent will follow. Not to talk about Latin America, that for us Europeans, with the exception of the Spaniards and Portuguese, it's too far away. And which will be the regional order in the Indo-Pacific, which will be the center of gravity of today's and tomorrow's world. They will be following one of open and rules-based, or they will follow a more authoritarian path. And these are answers that will determine our future. And we should be clear about our positioning and about our narrative and about our partnerships. We have to look for having stronger ties with many like-minded partners who share our values, like democracy and the rule-based international order. The good news is that under the new US administration, the transatlantic mood has completely changed. And yesterday in London with the Secretary of State Blinken, it was really a pleasure to see how close we are now talking and acting together. But at the same time, authoritarian countries are becoming more assertive, and take care. We can go to a new bipolarity where the authoritarians will face democracies, and the world can be split in two camps with economic decoupling and a balkanized internet. I don't think it's going to be in our interest. We have to continue engaging above our disagreements with countries like China or even Russia for sure, we have to work, because there are some global issues, some global problems that, well, climate change would be the first one to mention, but there are other that require collaboration, even with people who doesn't share our core values. And this requires getting a difficult balance between values and interest. And this balance will occupy our intellectual resources for the year to come. I'm finishing. As European Union, we must be clear where we stand, communicate it better, and act accordingly. This is the work I'm trying to do. And it's not always easy. It's not impossible. It takes time, it takes patience, but I am strongly convinced that only pulling our capacities together, the European civilization, I can tell it, which is a mixture of political freedom, economic prosperity, and social cohesion, could survive in the world that is growing up. Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share some of these thoughts. And I am looking forward to the conversation with Professor Nouwen and the audience. And once again, thank you very much for having the opportunity to participate in this event. I hope to be able to go to Firenze soon in person, and have the pleasure to see you again, Badia. Grazie.
Thank you so much for this very, very rich speech. And there's so many elements in there that I could or would love to pick up on. But let me begin with one sentence that really struck me. You said, in Europe, we tend to be very busy with ourselves. Now, you mentioned that in the context of an argument, we have to look outside Europe what is happening in order to keep up. And you gave this beautiful parallel with a running match. If we have to see how fast the others are running. So it is an argument about competition. But I think your sentence, in Europe, we tend to be very busy with ourselves, also resonates with the sentiment that was also expressed during this conference in several of the panels. And that is perhaps that Europe should show or work harder on understanding and should show more awareness of its colonial past and the continued implications of that colonial past. That Europe should show the humility that sometimes goes with those implications. And that Europe shouldn't just focus on competition, but it should also work more on international solidarity, solidarity beyond Europe. And that there can be a tension with this focus on the running match, and we have to be the first ones, and the idea of solidarity. So could we interpret your sentence of we tend to be too busy with ourselves, or very busy you said, but I read it as sometimes too busy, also as an admonition for Europe to be less, well, in your words, Eurocentric?
Well, we are very busy with ourselves because the political architecture of the European Union is a complex one. I can tell you that in order to get agreements and to implement these agreements, it requires to pass through a cumbersome process of meetings at different levels to try to make the council agreed, 27 member states to agree inside the college, then the college and the council and the college, the parliament, the European Parliament. This is our architecture, and it's difficult to pretend to have a complex system and to make it work smoothly and quickly. It's utopian. What we should try to avoid is how can I say, not to replicate the us versus the others, the European versus the rest of the world. It would not be productive, and it would not make us to appear as a partner with which people would like to engage. I talk about also empire mentality, and I mentioned Turkey and Russia appears having a kind of empire mentality. This is, thanks God, not our case. We have lost this empire mentality, and it's a very good thing because we have been empires for a very long time. Some moments one state, in other moments other, Spain, Germany, France, Britain. But we have to be aware that the DNA of others still is empire mentalities. And we stand for solidarity, multilateralism, and global partnership. All that is good, but one cannot be multilateral alone. If we want to practice multilateralism, we have to look for people to engage with us. And once again, I go to the idea of narrative. What I think the Europeans, we are lacking today is a narrative that combines values and interest. Because don't be naive. And the treaty clearly says, when the mandate I got from the treaty is, you have to develop a foreign policy taking into account both at the same time, our values and our interests. And needless to say that sometimes values and interests don't go on the same direction. They shock against each other. And this makes the difficulty of building this narrative. But we have to do that on the basis of a certain autonomy. At the beginning, we were talking about strategic autonomy. No? We have to build this idea of autonomy because, and you know, every time I am saying strategic autonomy, there is someone saying, and what about NATO? Well, it has nothing to do against NATO. We have been used to look for our security under the umbrella that the US has been offering to us for many years. And for many members of the European Union, this umbrella is still the good one. They don't want to have another one. Nobody wants to cancel our participation in NATO, but we have to have the capacity of facing our challenges when no one else will do it. Because some of these challenges in our neighborhood is our business. And the US, with President Trump and with the following presidents will tell us very clearly, you have to take care of your own problems. And this requires a certain capacity of act. And to act, we have to agree on the fundamental principles. And the difficulty for us is that our history, our culture, our experiences, at least on the last 100 years, have been so different that prevent us from having this common understanding of the world, which is the basis of any foreign and security policy. So let's start by building a common strategic culture based on cultural roots, based on a common understanding of the threats, based on willing to share the future. Even in the past, the history has been out by different routes. And this is something that will not be done through publishing regulations of approving directives. It's a much more difficult thing. I wonder why there is only one European university in Europe, like the one in Florence. We should have a lot of European universities.
Here I see your competition argument. More competition.
But we have to mix people. We have to mix people. We have to make people. You know, the other day I was in a camp in Mali, visiting a training camp for the Malian soldiers, and they were soldiers from 20 different member states. And this is the kind of thing that we have to do on the military side. And this brassage of ideas, of experiences, a big Erasmus on the everyday life is the only way of building a common sharing, a common understanding of that we are Europeans, we share an understanding of the world that can make us to overcome the differences. Otherwise, it will be always one or two member states blocking any kind of decision and making us acting too late.
Yes, Thank you so much. There are lots of questions coming in from the audience all over the world. We have only a few minutes left, so let me pick the easy ones. I think there's one multiple choice question, and there's one yes-no question. So we should be able to do that in the few minutes remaining. So the first yes-no question is there any chance finally to agree on a qualified majority voting on foreign and security policy at the next IGC to increase the efficiency of the EU in the area? And then let me also do the multiple choice question. That's a question about focus. Even in order to be effective, the EU should have priorities. And this person asks, what is the priority? Addressing the bipolar system? Is it climate, or is it restoring the multilateral order, or something else? So it's an open-ended multiple choice question.
Well, and this was the easy question, no?
Yeah.
I have an difficult one. So let me start by the second question, no? Priority, urgency. Urgency is to face climate change. And on that, we are launching a set of initiatives that can make us again the leaders on this field. Structurally, from a structural point of view, we have to restore the multilateral order, because without it, it will not be a solution for any other issue. The multilateral order has been severely damaged. There is no agreement on almost anything, many more vetoes than agreement. So we have to rebuild the multilateral order if we want to have a frame in which to work. And then geographically, there are 3 or 4 points in the map where we have to invest much more. I told them, the Balkans, the North Africa, and the Sahel. If I had to choose one continent in which to engage, I would say certainly Africa. Certainly Africa. And the first question, the easy one, was?
Oh, it's yes-no question. It's about the common foreign and security policy, whether we're going to get qualified majority voting, yes or no.
Hope of passing to qualifying majority on foreign policy. Well, if you want me to be sincere and to be honest, no, I don't think so. I don't think.
That was a very quick answer.
I don't think so.
Okay, that gives me time for another question.
My work would be much easier if I could propose decision by qualified majority, but I don't think member states are ready to abandon their veto right, because unanimity means that everyone has a veto right.
Yes. Now, and let me, in the final minutes that we have, ask a question about your legacy. And of course, you've only relatively recently started, and yet we can already see, I think, a legacy emerging. And that is with the launch of the EU Global Human Rights Sanctions Regime, you are building a legacy as the High Representative who expanded the EU's use of autonomous sanctions. And we had a panel on sanctions yesterday, and there was a question about how does the EU assess whether these sanctions are effective? What are the indicators of effectiveness? And there was one person from the audience who asked, does the EU ever admit that it got it wrong and that the sanctions didn't work, or even that the person shouldn't have been sanctioned? And if so, does it make amends?
Well, our sanctions are very limited. We are not implementing sanctions and can create a big problem for the ordinary people. The US are implementing sanctions in Venezuela, in Iran, in many places that create dire human situations. We only use sanctions against individuals or institutions, and their effectiveness is certainly limited. But they have a certain effectiveness. I cannot tell you which kind of measures we have been doing about the effectiveness of these measures, of these sanctions, but I recognize that our sanctions don't have the capacity that stronger economic sanctions may have, because we don't want to create a humanitarian situation.
Okay,
Thank you.
well, that's a fantastic answer to end on. I will be sanctioned if we go over time. So let me thank you very, very much for this very rich intervention. And I wish you a very good meeting in Porto.
Thank you. And thank you again.